Hey folks, it's Laura with Rain Tree Nursery. And here in the Pacific Northwest, we are at the end of summer, beginning of fall, and now is the time, even in our cool summer region, where our grapes are coming in for harvest. Grapes are some of the most unbelievably productive fruit that you can grow. In fact, I knew a woman in downtown Seattle who had a little 4x8 arbor, and she would harvest up to 120 pounds of grapes every year from this tiny little space. Now, that's fantastic. You can eat grapes all day, every day, but at some point, you're going to be overwhelmed with your harvest, and you're going to think to yourself, as I did, what am I going to do with all of this bounty? Well, one of the things I do after I eat my fill and I make some juice is I make raisins. So having the tools to dehydrate grapes into raisins is not a lot to have. You need your dehydrator, of course. I use a couple of bowls. You need your yield of grapes. I'm using hem rods here. And you need some kind of skewer that has a fairly fat gauge. This is a shish kebab skewer, but you could use a meat thermometer. You want something that's fatter. You don't want to use something like a toothpick. It's too thin and makes too small a hole. Step one is to remove the grapes from the woody skein. Now, this is something that you can do very, very roughly. I don't need to worry about this. Just basically get it all off into the bowl. Now, something you will notice on some variety of grapes is that as you're just kind of going through and pulling all this stuff off, you're going to notice that there are some woody bits that are still attached to your grape. And you can't leave that there. You don't want to eat that with your raisin, which then brings us to step two, which is taking off the tip. Now, step two, and this usually takes a little bit of time. So I do this step when I'm watching television at night or when I'm talking on the phone with friends. I go through and I just take off each of the little stems that are remaining on the grapes, and I put them in a second bowl. So after step two, I have a completely clean bowl of just grapes, no stems. Step three is to skewer the grapes and put them in the dehydrator. I have learned from experience, you can't just dump the grapes in the dehydrator. They're super juicy and they just don't dry. So I just take my skewer and kind of roughly skewer all the grapes till I got a big long group of grapes on my skewer, and then I dump them onto my dehydrator. And I just do that again while I'm watching TV or talking to somebody until I have a dehydrator full of grapes. I set it for 120 degrees, 130 degrees, turn the dehydrator on, and then walk away, check back every once in a while to rotate the trays. It takes usually about a day and a half to dehydrate all of these beautiful grapes into raisins. So start as soon as you get your harvest, so you can take all the time you need to work through your harvest easily and effectively and without a lot of stress. Alternatively, you can even dry these grapes on the vine. Here I have some glenoras, and I found when I went to go pick them that some of them had already started drying. Now, you can take your trusty skewer and go ahead and puncture the fruits that haven't started to dry yet. Although I would save that for some of the skeins that have the fruits less tightly packed than this. This is going to be a little bit hard to work with. So you can take a loose skein, puncture all of the fruits that aren't yet quite dry, lay the whole cluster in the dehydrator, and what you end up with is something beautiful and unusual, and of course, very tasty. And here we have our finished harvest. I've gone through and taken out all of the grapes that are really nice and dry, put them in my container, and then I continued to dry the grapes that weren't quite firm. This is really important. You have to dry the heck out of these things, because if you don't, if you leave them kind of soft and gooey like the ones you might get from the store, they will not be fully dry and they will not store well. So they need to be super dry. So I have all of my lovely dry things. I put them in my glass jar, and I don't forget to add a desiccant packet. This will go in with the grapes and it will keep everything really nice and dry, and they will store all winter long, or as long as you can manage not to eat them all. So here we go. Grapes from a raisin harvest, a really, really wonderful way to preserve the bounty and enjoy it during those dreary winter days. Thanks for joining us. It's Laura with Rain Tree Nursery, and we'll see you next time.